Not a good look for our profession.
How in the name of common sense did this ever get this far? Vaccines are not seek and destroy missions.
Because he was so severe.
This is nuts.
One of the top 20 things that she has discovered with her research company, Progenobiome, medicine has been corrupted. Where we go from here now, I don't know. Well, it doesn't work.
So angry, punishable with jail time.
Literally, this makes me believe we live in the Matrix.
Like, deadliest year in U.S. history.
It wasn't a question of if, but when.
First red.
If it doesn't work and it's safe, put it in a little Fauci Pez dispenser, give it to the patient, and shut the family up.
It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Gave Fauci an award for being a hero of the pandemic.
This has been a problem.
These were lies.
Let's talk about the healthcare professionals supporting this.
In the meantime, what was going on behind the scenes?
Irony of the whole thing is,
Harvey's 100% correct.
This is freaking annoying.
ultimately, we need to have hope for America.
What is going on here? What has poisoned your mind? Buckle up, kids.
Today we're going to really get into an amazing story of one of Tim's favorite topics, which is medical mavericks. But we're always excited to talk about stories that shape medicine, science, and the fight for truth. All right, today's subject matter is Bernice Eddy, and she was a trailblazing scientist and whistleblower whose integrity saved countless lives, even as she faced incredible opposition. And none other, the one and only Sofia Karstens is with us today to talk about who Bernice Eddy was. And Sofia knows a lot about her as well as lots of other things in the medical freedom movement. She's been on our show numerous times. She's an activist and advocate who's worked with RFK Jr. on projects like The Real Anthony Fauci. And she's also the co-founder of the Free Now Foundation and has played key roles in PACs and organizations focused on preserving medical freedom, children's health, and fighting corruption. So today, Sofia is going to help us uncover Bernice Eddy's legacy and why it's more relevant now than ever. And maybe we'll get a chance to dive into Sofia's personal journey and what keeps her motivated to make a difference in the world like she's doing. Welcome to the show amidst all of the chaos going on in your world over there in California today. I'm like, do I dare even share where you at? Yeah. It's a little bit shit showy here.
Yeah, not even the flames of hell that used to be a place called Los Angeles can stop the show from going.
I know. Literally last night I posted, I was like, I don't usually, post stuff like this. I'm not near the flames. I can obviously smell the smoke and I can see the smoke, but I'm not near the flames. Everybody, I'm fine. That was at 11 o'clock last night. And this morning I woke up and there's surrounded by flames. I'm like, well, that escalated quickly. So I know when you showed us that today, I'm like, okay, are we going to be one of those podcasts or those news episodes where people literally go running from the camera in the middle of it? Let's hope not. Oh my gosh. So, well, thanks for being here again. And we see you guys. Happy New Year. Same to you. Well, let's dive in. Bernice Eddy. So you wrote an amazing Substack article about her. That was incredible. Why don't you share with everybody who she was and why she was an important figure in a medical history? Yeah, it is an important medical history, and we can get into, some of the capillaries, the broad strokes overview. In 1954, Bernice Eddy was a lab scientist. She was at NIH, and she was in charge of performing the safety tests for the polio vaccines. What's important is Salk's inactivated polio vaccine was a killed virus vaccine that was to be used in the national vaccination program. It was a massive program. After testing the vaccines on monkeys, she and the rest of her team discovered that the vaccine actually contained residual live poliovirus, which resulted in the monkeys showing polio-like symptoms, the classic paralysis. This pointed to a flawed manufacturing process for the vaccines. And Eddy did what any good scientist in this field would do, and she reported her findings. She was basically told to stand down. She continued to report her findings, and eventually, after several attempts to call attention to this issue, she was given what we would call today whistleblower treatment. And at that time, they had already rolled out this program. They had already announced it, and they went through with this. The flawed vaccine was licensed for use for the public. I think it's 120,000 doses of the polio vaccine that contained an improperly inactivated version of the live poliovirus was manufactured and produced. Of children who received the vaccine, 40,000 developed what's called abortive poliomyelitis. That's myelitis that effectively goes away on its own, but it did have that effect. Developed paralytic poliomyelitis. And of these, 5 children died from polio. And those exposures led to an epidemic of polio in the communities, in the families in the communities of the affected children, resulting in the death of 5 children and 113 others paralyzed.
So are you familiar with the fact that they actually pushed very hard to rush that original Salk polio virus or vaccine out because they wanted it out for Roosevelt's birthday? So Franklin Roosevelt was a polio victim.
Yes.
They did everything they could to, hide the fact that he was partially paralyzed and had to use crutches in a wheelchair.
It's all about the optics, right? So It's like we're doing, and I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole of paperclip and all that stuff because there's a lot of stuff under those floorboards that adds into this. But even if you stay out of the, I say conspiracy theory, even though now it's widely known, it's just conspiracy. But you can, even if we stay away from that, the reality is that they did push very hard. Where have we seen that before? Where have we seen a rushed medical product that, is pushed upon the unsuspecting masses? But what ended the Cutter crisis, which that is what I just described, became known as the Cutter crisis. Went down in history as the worst pharmaceutical disaster ever to happen. And on May 6, 1955, the NIH did announce to the press that the National Vaccine Program, the polio vaccine program, vaccination program, would be postponed. And a little too late, because everything I just described had already happened. So at that time, you would think that caution would have been called for. But on the revival of the program, post-incident, post-Cutter, Eddy, who was reinstated along with many of her team, also discovered an association with SV40. So simian virus 40 is a virus that is so reliably carcinogenic. It is what scientists use to inject rats in laboratory tests for cancer to induce cancer and tumors in laboratory animals. So this simian virus 40 was discovered in association with the new version of the polio vaccine. And the issue is that the SV40 was present in monkey kidney cells used to grow the vaccine. So subsequently, the investigators found SV40 DNA in biopsy specimens obtained from patients with cancers. Those cancers including, but not limited to, mesothelioma, which is lung cancer, bone cancer, lymphatic cancers. And that correlated to the same types of cancers that were found in people who had received the vaccine. So SV40, as I just said, it's a known oncogenic DNA virus, induces primary brain and bone cancers. The major types of tumors that are induced by SV40 in laboratory are the same as those human malignancies found to contain SV40 markers. So Is it a smoking gun? No, because nothing ever is. But it's as close to a smoking gun as I think we're going to get. And at the very least, you would think that caution would be indicated. The issue is that we know what did happen, but the worst possible case scenario is what happened before they rolled everything back. But what if we hadn't done that, right? Right, if they had just kept right on going, or that didn't happen and some other downstream insult or injury were to occur. We don't know when we're dealing with these things and some anomaly is reported. Okay, well, we got to wind back to, that's first principles. You've got to wind back to the beginning and you don't just skip over it because, okay, that's the worst thing that happened and it's pretty bad. But if that hadn't happened and you just kept going, how do we know that what else would have happened downstream? So there's this whole host of what ifs that are as of yet, undetermined because it did stop, but it only stopped because one bad thing happened. So it becomes an infinite liability, really, when we see these markers and we see these anomalies pop up in the testing. That's why we have proper testing. The idea that people would be against proper testing is absurd. Wouldn't you want to know that something that you are injecting into your body that, as you say, is rushed or is pushed very hard to meet a certain deadline or date that is not correlative to a date that is scientifically sound? It's some emotional optic.
Yeah. So I was going to
say, the first thing that pops in my head is that I think the masses that were listening assumed that it was soundly tested, that there was no signals that popped up, that it all was kosher and according to the standards, and they bought into that. They did, though.
Yeah, but you have to. I want to try to sprinkle in a little bit of detail because you covered a tremendous amount of bandwidth there. So Qatar, the reason it was called the Qatar incident is because the manufacturing company was the Qatar company, mm-hmm. which had terrible, apparently, that we found out later, quality controls. So the quality mm-hmm. control was completely screwed up, and that's what Dr. Eddy figured out, was that okay, we're producing actual live virus. Okay, so that happened, and then that basically killed the Salk vaccine. It basically wiped out the Salk vaccine, at least initially. And then, but it's what's really interesting in this story, there's a detail which Bernice Eddy was working on the connection between viruses and cancer, and no one had made that connection. It was actually her and another woman, interestingly, were working on this connection, and they came up with these, what were the polymorphous viruses or whatever they called them, where they actually could give cancer to one rat or hamster and then transfer, mm-hmm. Without the cancer cells, just the virus cells, and they would get the same cancer. Mm-hmm. So before this, no one had really made the connection that viruses had something to do with cancer. And so she's doing this research and figuring this out. Meanwhile, they're getting ready to release the Sabin vaccine, which is the oral polio vaccine. Right. And what do you have to do to make the oral polio vaccine, which is a live attenuated vaccine? Right. You need live polio virus. Right. Well, they were incubating this in mushed up rhesus monkey kidneys.
That's right.
Well, holy cow, SV40 or simian virus 40 lives in what? Simians, monkeys. It doesn't give monkeys anything. It maybe gives them the sniffles, but it sure shit doesn't give monkeys brain cancer. And so,
well, you touch on something really important, and it's bifurcated. So you, on the one hand, that's correct. When humans as well, polio has been around for thousands of years. People didn't necessarily know they had it, or if they did, they had the sniffles, cold-like symptoms. After a 1,000-year, however long this virus has been around, all of a sudden it starts causing paralysis and other potentially fatal symptoms. Virus pathology 101 It is not an effective strategy for a virus to kill its host. It is not an effective strategy. Viruses do not evolve to become more pathogenic, more virulent. They become less so and more contagious. They don't want their host sitting around in bed dying. They want their host running around spreading the virus to new hosts. So when you see an anomaly in terms of pathogenesis, you have to look at what's called an environmental insult. So there are a limited number of culprits to which these environmental insults can usually be assigned. In this particular case, and again, we don't know, the studies were never allowed, but there is a culprit that the shoe fits, and that culprit is DDT. The vaccine polio began when DDT came on the market and was approved for use for spraying. DDT is a highly carcinogenic and toxic chemical that was sprayed on crops and for a period of time children, which is a whole other conversation, but they realized that was maybe not a good idea. And, I mean, we have a long history. Thalidomide, DDT, we can go down that rabbit hole too. But the reality is that this was approved for use. And then the polio symptoms that were anomalous started showing up. DDT does cause these symptoms, especially when it can be combined with other environmental factors. So if we're looking at a virus that has the environmental insult of this toxic chemical, when were most of these diagnoses found? In the summer months during the spraying season, where in communities, farm communities, where they were spraying, where people were bathing in farm pots. And when did it decline? Not before the vaccine, not after the vaccine, before the vaccine, correlating directly to the banning of DDT. So that's one example of a possibility of other factors that could have contributed to this, other than this just deadly virus that suddenly went rogue. It went AWOL and went against all criteria that we know today to be the pathogenesis of a pathogen. That's one side of it where you're absolutely correct. It is, there are these other factors that can enter into these things. The other side of what you're saying does take me back to paperclip, which is we had at that time a group of scientists largely taken from Nazi Germany and given projects in the bioweaponry field. Important also thing to note, the reason, and this is not the only reason, but one of the main reasons that we have been so militant about these vaccines. We took the vaccine schedule from 3 to 72 in one generation, and 1986 and PrEP Act, and then 1989 became a free-for-all. The space just opened wide up. HHS themselves draws a hard line for autism in 1989. There's all these things. So why are we ignoring this? Why are we doubling down just like they did because of it? So the bioweapons program is contingent upon the vaccine program. And the reason for that is that the accelerated evolution process, which is the process by which previously they had been working with these pathogens before, previously meaning before the mRNA explosion. But the issue is that in the medical space, we are disallowed from simply doing these kinds of mad scientist research and employing researchers to do these kinds of things, even in our 3-letter agencies. That's prohibited. But the process by which they yield the accelerated evolution, it yields a spectrum from the most to the least virulent. The least virulent, that's how they create the attenuated virus vaccine. So right. The least virulent ends up being used in a vaccine program. Well, the most virulent ends up getting used in the bioweapons. They can't just do this. They have to do this, and the byproduct is they're allowed to do this. It's like in the medical fields, when something's not FDA approved, you can't just prescribe it. You can have a research facility and use it, but you can't just prescribe it. So it's the same concept that's applied to the research side. And so when we look at paperclip and other possibly as of yet unknown projects, these scientists were working specifically, and it is known today, what we now call gain of function. It is known that we were developing the weaponization of certain types of cancers. That was the point. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just like, oh, we discovered that these two things are correlative. No, these two things were directed. So the advent of virus and oncogenic DNA virus possibly, very probably, was not accidental. There had to be an environmental insult, and that might have been a deliberate environmental insult. In other words, in a lab. So we know that they were weaponizing viruses and all sorts of, bioweapons. One of those was weaponized cancer.
Yes, because I remember this. I remember seeing this on Canadian television in the late 70s or very early 80s. And then I went back and in my reading through all of the COVID nonsense,
And it's gone.
came upon it again, which was they wanted to coat cigars with these oncogenic
Oncogenic
cancer
DNA viruses.
and send them to Castro. So he would smoke these and then he would get cancer and he'd be dead in 12 months.
Along with,
And it would be natural causes.
I think it was 31 other overt, not that they know of, attempts on his life. But that's another, they
would have succeeded in 1960. We would have never got Justin Trudeau. So, I mean, hey.
Yeah. It's, and, we're kind of seeing now that the Cuban missile crisis kind of never ended. So, especially what we're dealing with, the election stuff out of Venezuela, out of Cuba, out of China, Philippines, and all these countries that are contributing since 2008, you kind of start to look back. Looking forward, you don't see the pattern, but in hindsight, you're like, oh, look, all those dots connect in a straight line. That's kind of coincidental.
Well, what I find fascinating from a cultural perspective is if you question vaccines, at all, regardless of whether it's the COVID vaccine or whatever, the answer you always get, there's two answers you always get from lay people. I get this from other doctors, which is, well, what about polio and smallpox?
That's always
my response is, well, what about polio and smallpox? I mean, polio doesn't spread like a regular virus. It doesn't. It's a GI virus. So you consume it, you eat it, you don't inhale it. But it should have been in these massive epidemics in the developing world where they had essentially no clean water and no hygiene, and it didn't. It spread in pockets in the developed world that coincidentally were spraying, apple orchards and basically everything with DDT.
Right. That's right.
And so that's like, okay, you needed the virus, but you needed an environmental exposure, which again, from a bioweapons perspective is genius because you can affect an entire population and you don't start killing them till you spray the second agent.
And there's no way to ever, we do with this with the vaccines all the time too. There's no way to prove that someone did or didn't suffer an injury or death because of a vaccine. So you can't, there are too many cofactors. So it's a genius way to keep fingerprints off downstream liabilities. And it's even hard to prove, correlation is not causation, but in most of these cases, we don't even have the correlative. We have a signal, but we were not even able to chase the signal down. And what I mean by that is, you have a person that you see who has lung cancer and they have yellow fingers. You might be tempted to assign, then you see 30 people who have lung cancer and they all have the yellow fingers. You might be tempted to assign the yellow fingers as a causative or even correlative to the lung cancer. But you cut off the yellow fingers, the person still has lung cancer. It's obviously not the yellow fingers, it's the cigarette. So you have the invisible actual causation and the signal is at a certain, it's blunted. You can't chase that down because the actual causation is invisible. So it's really quite genius.
Oh, that's really well said, for sure. I want to turn back a little bit, back to kind of Bernice Eddy, the Maverick, and tie in more of, with what's going on. So do you know, so she was the whistleblower that was speaking up against it. What actually happened to her as far as being ostracized?
She was retaliated against. Yeah, they retaliated. I mean, they kind of what they do to all of us. They discredit us. They dismiss us. I mean, you said it really well, Tim. Like that's well. What about polio? And the whole reason that I wrote the article that I did is because with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running for when he was running for office, obviously, but when he was nominated for the HHS secretary, the onslaught of misinformation that started coming down the pike and the attempts at tying things together. Aaron Siri, who is a lawyer who has 200 clients, who happens to also be, that's like saying my grocer, like it's literally, it's not, it was completely unrelated. Like, yes, okay, he also knows lots of other people who shop at that grocery store. Like, that doesn't make me. So Aaron represents clients who legitimately have dealt with harms. And so he had, because also you have to realize that there have been hundreds and thousands of instances, especially in a lot of African countries lately, of polio outbreaks. All of the polio outbreaks that have happened have been traced back to the vaccine in recent years. And the health agencies have identified this. So this is not, I'm not speculating. This is the health agencies who said, no, these are vaccine. You can tell the difference when you test this. This is vaccine induced polio. A lot in the African countries, we were seeing, I mean, a lot of unreported, because we tend to not care about that stuff in this country. But much like with the AIDS drugs and everything else, it was killing a lot more people in Africa than was being reported. And when Aaron was dealing with the harms to his clients, he recommended that we didn't recommend banning everything. He wanted the same thing that everybody wants, which is, can we instate some proper safety testing so that we have the proper studies, we have the double-blind placebo studies, where we become the gold standard for safety and efficacy. It's great if this is, efficacious, but we do need safety testing. We can't just do away with that. Different conversation whether it's effective, but if you believe that it is, that's fine. But can we at least make sure it's safe? This is what Aaron was doing, and it was because he specifically had vaccine injured client that he was representing. It had nothing to do with Bobby. It had nothing to do with Bobby running for president, taking over HHS. Bobby is not and was never trying to ban the polio vaccine. But what do they come out of the gate with immediately? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to ban the polio vaccine. That's not happening. It was never happening. And why are you trying to connect these dots into a unicorn? Like, it's insane. And so exactly what you just said is unfortunately what ends up happening. As soon as anybody says, hey, guys, with a history like this, maybe we should really, make sure that this is safe before we are injecting our infants with it twice. So the call for safety has become, because no, we can't have that. So the moniker that gets assigned is like, well, we're all anti-vax and we're trying to, I literally got into it yesterday with someone on Facebook and I just gave up because she came back with like, I would like my health secretary to not bring back polio and AIDS. And I was like, well, okay, the conversation's over. Cause like, you obviously like they're the NPCs that Patrick Byrne calls them, the NPCs, right? Like they're programmed with like 5 things, those dolls where you pull the string and it's like 5 things.
Same thing over.
And if you see something that's like different to one of their 5 things, like they short circuit and they just say one of those 5 things, even though it doesn't really make sense. So that's what it was. But that's it. People are programmed. And, I just said to this person, I wonder if because she tried to tell me, what the incoming administration was doing. And I said, I wonder if you're misinformed. I've been to DC twice. I've been meeting with senators and meeting with Congress people, have a couple of projects that I'm working on for some reform that really could help things. And all of these individuals in Congress, I'm telling you right now, want to help the American people. They're all really, really good people. They're trying to unwind the regulatory capture. I said, I wonder if you're misinformed or if you've been misinformed about our objective and what we're trying to do. I'm a librarian and a lawyer, and I'm perfectly qualified to discuss. And I was like, okay, I didn't say unqualified. I said misinformed. But she spat that back at me, and she's like, I just don't want to bring back polio and AIDS. And I was like, okay, so we're regurgitating rhetoric. You heard it on whatever. You saw a meme that sounded really good, and you're like, yeah, I'm on this side. And you're not interested in change. You're not interested. You want that to be what you believe in, so that's what you're going to believe in.
But here's the disconnect. And I just this article will be out, I think, sometime this week or early next week. And I wrote about it. I called it Cult Nation. And I said, I used to think the cultiest thing in the world were diets, because people would, they don't say I'm a vegan. They say I'm vegan, which is like, okay, that's just bizarre. It's like your entire identity is what you eat. It just seems so crazy. And, carnivores do it like everybody does. But the thing that gets me is you can't question vaccines. Like if you question antibiotic use, you're a smart person trying to make sure that antibiotics are used judiciously so that we do not get antibiotic resistance, so that we don't kill our microbiome. Like you're a steward of medicine.
Well, you know why,
but
right?
But if you question vaccines at all, you're an insane nut job that wants everyone to die of polio.
Right.
And
that's what I'm saying. And the problem isn't that people are dumb. It's that they're to what agency do you go when they're all in on it, right? Like where would they get the proper information? And there's also enough social pressure that makes it really uncomfortable if you start to think critically. 1984 was not a work of fiction. It was based on Stalinist Soviet Union. And it worked. When Trotsky was killed, the media of the time, billboards 10 stories high showing Lenin and Stalin leading the Bolshevik Revolution. The younger generation grew up believing that was their history. They didn't know any different. The older generation was like, we just want to live our last few days and not worry about this. The middle generation, our age, we started going, wait a minute, that's not what happened. We have brain cells. We remember that this isn't what happened. And they were dragged off to the gulags and executed. So the other half, because that was a very uncomfortable thing to live with, the other half of the middle generation developed what Orwell described as doublethink in order to live in whatever they got to do and say to not be dragged off to the gulag and still hold reality and not go crazy, because to think critically meant you were dragged off to the gulag. So it's not people's fault. It really is a system, and it really does work, and it really is a model, and it really does work. It's a psyop. I mean, there's a reason that it works. And there's a reason that it's used. And what you're dealing with is a powerful global macroeconomic machine. And you're making a run at it. Of course, they're going to target those people who are brave enough to stand up through the discomfort of the rest of the masses that are like, yeah, that's just not my fight, because I don't want to be dragged out to the gulags. So,
but it's interesting because if there's any real science here, it's super simple. Mm-hmm. Like Peter Hotez takes his bedhead and his bow tie and runs away like a rat leaving the Titanic. Whereas if he was an actual scientist and not in on the grift and worth tens of millions of dollars from vaccine patents, he would be welcoming RFK with open arms. He'd be like, okay, let's get it on. I'm going to prove to you that you're a freaking nut job that destroyed the great political name of one of the greatest political families in the history of the United States. I will own you. I will crush you, because the truth is on my side. Somebody who is knows the truth and has been set free by the truth is not running away and using ad hominem lame ass attacks.
But look at what happened.
There are people who fall into that category besides Hotez. I mean, you know, my nemesis, Paul Offit, and, you know, obviously Tony Fauci. But the issue is, again, we can, and I remember saying this to you guys before during COVID, we can get rid of the Dasigs and the Collins and the Walensky's and the Fauci's and the Hotez and the Offits, and we can get rid of all these people. And unfortunately, it's just cutting off the head of the Hydra, because what we have is a system that is greater than the sum of its parts and more powerful than any one individual in it. So when you have a system that is set up to allow individuals with moral elasticity to come in and exploit it, there's always going to be an individual with moral elasticity who's going to be willing to come in and exploit. So it doesn't, you know, we like as humans to like string up the bad guy, and then we're like, okay, we got the bad guy, we can all go home. You know, when it's like, yeah, no. And that's why what I call like the Hollywood approved activism list, which allows you to go to like the tertiary level. But if you try to go below that level, like, no, you're canceled. So it's like all the brave people who are saying the exact same thing that every other person is saying, like, that's allowed. But but the real people who are like, yeah, but actually it's worse than that. It's worse than that, because what we're dealing with is corruption and regulatory capture on a massive scale. We have not just government agencies that are funded by the industry they're charged with regulating, but we have corporations that, from the 30,000 foot view, own the whole mechanism. We have a military industrial complex that it supersedes. We can rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic in these like little levels. But if you really go to the outside view and you realize that the one thing, like, yeah, this person over the Dasig and all these guys and Hotez, and they're all serving their purpose here. So are we. So is everybody else. But it's all to achieve the one thing from this 30,000 foot view. So it's the system. It's not just a person. And so, yes, that is indicative that one of these people you can identify, because I do think there's a spectrum. I think that there's, in this area, they call it witting versus unwitting assets. And usually unwitting assets eventually become witting, but then it's too late. So Mockingbird, all that stuff, they don't start as witting assets, but they become witting assets because they're locked in it. And that goes for every South American country or Middle Eastern country that we have gone into to exploit resources and inflate people in debt. A model which works just as well on our own people as it does other countries. We can apply that as well. You know, the forecasters and everybody who was going into Indonesia and Iran and all of these other countries, you know, at the time they would be like, yeah, something doesn't matter. Well, whatever. And then they start seeing more and more. Well, by now it's in too deep. So I think there's a spectrum. And then, you know, in your guys' profession, certainly you see it where you have people who had just completely drank the Kool-Aid, but you also have people who maybe are like, yeah, but I can do more good inside, or yeah, but I have all this medical debt, or yeah, but I have a family, or I just spent 14 years going through all this. And now I'm finally have my dream job of helping save people. I don't want to feel bad about the other stuff. So I'm just going to put the blinders on and do this. And then you have the people that are literally like, yeah, I'm getting paid a shit ton of money from pharma and I'm going to keep doing it. And then you have the people that are like, I am a sociopath and I actually don't care that people die. And then you have the mastermind. So you have that spectrum, but even that spectrum is still within the system. So we can get rid of the more mastermindy people, but like then someone else is going to come in and take over all this other stuff. Guess what? Up here, that's the model.
So
I'm depressed now.
No.
But absolutely fair enough. I do think this is why so many people are so resistant to accessing that part of their humanity. You know, I've had people recently say to me, I'm not interested in feeling bad about it. I'm just going to do this. And I was like, right, well, that's turning your head while your neighbors dragged away. And that's why it works. People don't like discomfort, but also the lie is that, you know, remember during the pandemic, if you just do this, like everything will go back to normal. That was never an option. That was never an option. This is not cake or death. If you like Eddie Izzard, It's not cake or death. This is Sophie's choice. And so when and by the way, the choice is if you're going to sacrifice now or later, not whether you're going to sacrifice or not. And if it's later, by the way, it's going to be worse. Just ask Solzhenitsyn. But the reality is that when you try to talk to someone who has been, as you said, indoctrinated into this bubble that they're the good people, because you got weaponized morality and weaponized compassion and all this stuff involved. But then on another layer, they've also been programmed, let's say, to look at anyone who threatens their happy life and their comfortable life or the life of someone they love as the enemy. And then that person who's standing up against whatever it is has been that person being the enemy has been indoctrinated. And this person is a threat to you. That's what's been indoctrinated. So what it does is it turns us against each other. And that is the model. As I always use this anecdote. I'm sure you've heard it. If you put two different species of black and brown ants in a jar, they will coexist peacefully, or in a terrarium or whatever. They will coexist peacefully. If you shake the container in which they reside, they will turn on each other, each believing the other species to be the cause of the chaos because they don't understand that someone's shaking the jar. So that's where we are right now. And you're right. It's like you can't even talk about it because that person has been convinced that even entertaining what you're saying is a threat to it's an existential threat to them and the people that they love. And in order to peel back that layer and accept that that's where we are, exactly what you just said, May, it's so bleak and it's so depressing. And most people, honestly, would rather not. I would rather not. I wish I could unsee and unknow what I have seen and know. If I could take it all back, I mean, would I make a different choice? Maybe, because it's bleak and awful. And I don't know that we're going to win this one, but I have hope and I'm here and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I better pick up a sword and a shield and try to do this. But it's not because it's comfortable for me. I don't like being here. But
so what keeps you going? Because I know that you're a huge warrior fighter and you're always on.
Ninja baby, I hope.
Okay. That's a good question. I don't feel I have any choice. It's not, I wish I could say it's because I'm so inspired to now I really I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is where we are. Like, what's my job today that I can do? I mean, we can do the whole esoteric thing of, my father calls himself an ethicist, and he always said, leave this world, leave everything in this world, including your life, better than you found it. So leave the people and leave everything better. So we can take on that, moral imperative, but really that's not, certainly that's a guiding force, but I do, my tribalism is not to man or woman or political party or, my tribalism is to save the kids. And when I see firsthand at a legislative level, at an executive level, at the judiciary, daily basis, and the media, fourth branch government, when I see what is going on, I can't, what choices do I have? I can, go join the masses and enjoy what little time we have left. I can run away and hide, or I can pick up a sword. And, Solzhenitsyn said it really well. What if we had met every soldier with whatever we had in the front rooms, instead of cowering in the back rooms with an axe or a bat, whatever we had? What if they were afraid that they might not actually make it home that night? What if? But we didn't love freedom enough. And we deserved everything that happened after that because we didn't even try to fight. So once a whole lot of people just got forcibly unplugged from the matrix. So I feel like, there's a little bit of movable middle that kind of moved over a little in our direction. But historically, we have been a very small group. And, the Lawrence of Arabia method of army, has proven wise. But I think it might be time to come out from under. And, we're either going to dive all the way off this cliff, or we're going to steer the ship away from the falls. And I do think, we have a shot. I'm not delusional. I say under this new administration, with the people that Donald Trump has put around him, before we were in a straitjacket, now we're in a really fitted blazer with a little bit of room in the sleeves. So I'm not delusional. I don't think like, oh my God, we're going to do everything and it's all going to change. But the reality is we have not 4 years. We have 18 months at most, probably closer to a year. But I don't know whether we're going to have 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. I don't know how long. But in every moment that we have with this road that has opened a little, even if it's like a footpath, I'm going to take it because I see where I want to go and I see that terrain and I'm like, okay, well, this is how I have to navigate to get there. I don't think that, we're going to make a 180. This is going to take decades. We have to uncapture science itself. That's going to take decades. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We have to unwind a lot of really bad infrastructure. But I do feel that laying strategic infrastructure for the course correct is all you can do. And if you're steering a ship and you turn it 3 degrees, no one on that ship is going to feel that adjustment, but you're going to end up on a different continent.
Yeah.
And as much time as we have to turn it a couple degrees to lay that strategic infrastructure so that we can end up on a different continent, to unwind the regulatory and corporate capture, to unwind the corruption, the corporatocracy, the oligopoly, whatever you want to call it, military industrial complex, medical industrial complex, the more that we can start to tick those degrees, the more we will end up on a different continent. So I do believe there is hope. And I don't feel, hopeless about it. But I'm not like, well, we're going to go win a gold medal tomorrow at 5:00. Like that.
So for the everyday, person listening out there that doesn't have maybe say the same bandwidth connections that you do, but in their little community, what they're doing, how does that person be part of the bigger movement to turn the ship, even the 3 degrees? What can they do?
Local and hyper-local. I'm telling you, we can get into a whole other political discussion about, I don't even believe in swing states. There's swing counties. But local and hyper-local. Everyone can get involved at every level. And by the way, that's what's going to do this. Why my super PAC is called Decentralize America. We're not just talking about money. The more that we can get federal fingers out of our lives, which is, by the way, how it was designed. They have systematically created reasons and need to take that, but it has not been organic and it has not been given back. And it won't be unless we take it. At no time in history has a government that has taken rights from the people ever given them back voluntarily. So local and hyper-local. That means if you can get involved at a state level, awesome. If you can get involved in a county level, awesome. If you can get involved in your city, great. Run for school board, run for, city council, run for whatever it is, run for my great, beautiful, wonderful girlfriend is about to be instated. We're praying for the Los Angeles County chair of the GOP. There are groups of like-mindeds out there. They exist. They are doing great work. And the more we can link arms and elevate our allies, and we are in this foxhole together, instead of being like little satellites here and there or relying on the guy in Washington to do it, he's got his own problems. And he also comes from the fact that she comes in, which can be a little problematic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but soon Soon we will be living on the Gulf of America and we'll own Greenland. So,
Oh boy.
I think I'm going to move to Greenland. That's much more
I'm
peaceful.
like, what in the frickin' worst?
Move somewhere and become an expert on snails. Forget everything I know.
Sounds great.
No, I think, we know you have to jump off here in a second, but I think that's exactly it. Local, we are not powerless. That's the key.
No.
We have the power. We've given it away. That's the
The
problem.
verticals exist in your education, medical, food sustainability, whatever it is in your community. Building up that parallel, what are we going to do when the house of cards falls? We need to have this. Solzhenitsyn talks about that too. We need to have the parallel built.
Yeah.
We need to have those infrastructures. So you're not doing nothing by even going grassroots lobbying, going to the Capitol and grassroots lobbying. Tara Thornton and Freedom Angels, the best resource I know of to get people involved to learn how to grassroots lobby at the legislative level at the Capitol. It's a day. Take a day. Everybody can do it. Everybody can do it.
Wonderful.
And it makes a difference. It makes a big difference.
Well said. Way to end it and wrap it up. Thanks for being here, Sophia. This has been
Thank you
great.
guys
Thanks
for
for sharing your
having me.
insights. Yes. And, I want you to literally be safe with that fire around you.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, we've lived through that
little-
before. I
Little
know.
tracks of blue in the smoke. I'm like, I don't really know what's happening right now.
So we hope that everybody, I know that you'd enjoy listening to this. Is there anywhere people can follow what you're doing? I don't think so, right? You kind of go below the radar.
I try to stay invisible. Well, I don't like pick a target.
I know. Smart girl.
But yeah, no, you can. I mean, I'm on Twitter and I'm on, social media, but yeah, I do try to stay. As quiet as possible.
On the underside. Well, please, everyone, share this episode. Sure to subscribe, leave us a review, share it with someone, and we're all in this together. We can hopefully make a better, healthier future for us, our kids, and
remember, no savior is coming to
Yes.
save you.
That's
RFK
it.
is not coming. Trump is not coming.
No one.
Santa's not coming.
No.
Your job is to save yourself and
That's it.
save your family and save your neighbors.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why every single person did one little tiny hyper-local thing, we would not be having this conversation. That's how much it matters.
Perfect way to summarize. Love it.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.